So would love to ask you all, as a first question, where do you all stand with agent deployment?
Who's going first? Well, I mean, I could take that. So it really depends on the use case, right? So I think what we've seen a lot of success so far is with customer support, and we've seen a proliferation over there. We just had the CEO of HubSpot, post today morning about the success she's seen with HubSpot customer success offering. I think when it comes to SDRs, outbound, inbound, there's a lot of buzz around with 11 AI and with the other folks. But for the most part, uh, at the enterprise level, we focus more on enterprise agents like around AI account planning, revenue operations, sales assistants, et cetera, et cetera, and competing mostly with the likes of Copilot and Anna Einstein, et cetera. We've seen as long as you can deliver value and really help the folks along the way, the AEs, then you're going to see usage. But if it's not really easy to use, as you know, most salespeople have ADD. So if it's not really easy to use and instant value, then unfortunately, it's going to be a long road, right? So that's what we're seeing. So
I can share my experience. Obviously, we eat our own dog food at SalesPeak. So what we have is, again, an AI agent that deals with all the inbound. Actually, instead of me speaking with everybody, I have an AI that can represent me and speak with all my website visitors. So that's for granted. And now I'm not sure about to use the word agent, but just for example, I've orchestrated a multi-channel marketing campaign last week, just me and Claude. Literally took me 3 or 4 hours, something that 6 months ago I would need probably 3 weeks and two people on that. So some of it were agents, some of it of me corresponding with an AI. And we continuously think on how do we not hire the next person? How can we embed AI, whether that's agent, whether that's corresponding with that, to really improve all the process that we have, internal and external as well.
Yeah, so
Anyone?
from my
Go
experience,
for
I
it.
probably have more experience working with a tech startup. Like most of the company that I work with, they are already deploying not one but the multiple AI agents across coding, operation, marketing, and the sales. So for a while that I was thinking that AI agent is really popular, but I traveled to Las Vegas for a conference last week, and I had more exposure to more traditional industries. Then I realized that we're still crossing the chasm, and that we're still the AI agent is popular among the early adopters, but if you start talking to the mass majority of the population, that we're still very early. That people know that AI agents are hot, but many enterprise leaders that they are still prudent in terms of thinking about to really rolling out the agent in a mass production capacity. So I heard that many companies that they're testing. Definitely they're curious and they're testing, but at the same time they still feels careful, and they still are in the phase of slowly experimentation and rolling out. But in the Bay Area for the tech startup, but that everyone's embracing the AI agents efficiency.
I'll share a pretty interesting stat along the way. So a couple of weeks ago, I ran a poll amongst a pretty tech-oriented go-to-market audience. And here are the results, actually. So the question was, how are you thinking about AI agents for your go-to-market? And actually, only 5% were fully implemented and seeing great results, right? Which is really interesting. Um, Obviously, 30% were currently implementing, and then over 60% have not even started, right? A big part, almost 10% has not even thought about it yet, which is really interesting. But there's a still massive part of the market. And this was, bear in mind, within a tech-oriented audience. So imagine was like within the rest of the world.
Well,
But
just
yeah,
to
on our
jump
end,
in here,
yeah.
I wanted to share a similar observation. So as a growth advisor, I work with a number of companies, both B2B and B2C. And I think one of the shared challenges that I see in all of this is, I think the potential is crazy, as a lot of our panelists here have expressed with use cases. But I do think the challenge for a lot of what we do in growth is real. And, one of the big challenges that I see is that a lot of the context that we have in our work is very cross-functional in nature. I think Omer was sharing how he sort of set up this Claude multi-faceted marketing campaign, but there's various points in which there are agentic work, and there's also sort of more co-pilot work where he's primarily the driver here. And so one of the challenges here is that from doing growth internally in companies and helping companies with it, I actually generally see that the data is very siloed in nature. So, if you talk to anyone who's ever worked in growth or marketing, they'll probably be able to tell you a pretty good story about the 6 or 12 months it took them to create a single source of truth for even something like user acquisition data, or how it took them a really long time to even have one single dashboard that combined multiple data pipelines. And even then it was still imperfect, right? So I do think one of the challenges of having a highly functional agent for driving growth within the context of an organization is that a lot of the work that we do is relying on so many different tools and data that lives in different systems. And a lot of these systems are data walled gardens, like Meta ads, for example, sort of the basic performance marketing. And some data is easier to access, maybe website traffic data, but then there are campaigns that we host in our email marketing CRMs and Braze and otherwise. And there's not a really easy way to streamline all that context into a single place. So it's really tough for the autonomous agentic systems to make decisions on our behalf because they're not being able to access this data in real time. So I'm sure that that's a problem that can and eventually will be solved. But, because of that, as of today, I do think some of the best use cases that I'm, more excited about immediately roll out for are going to be much more verticalized, where there's this data context loop that can drive autonomous decisions by an agent. The great examples that we covered here today include things like outbound sales, probably a great one where there's a lot of the automation, logic, co-pilot nature of work that can become automatic, and we can have clear decision making based on that data context loop. And, I think an area that's going to be tough, for example, for an agent to come in and really kind of take over would be for high performing creative work, where again, that data is based on creative performance that's usually housed in a separate data system or this kind of data walled garden, and that data context loop doesn't quite exist yet. So, that's kind of how I'm seeing some of the challenges, honest, to reflect some of the lack of adoption that we're seeing with agents, especially in the growth and marketing work that we do.
It's really fascinating, Sandy. I think that's really consistent with our findings as well. I mean, you offered some stats in these, but we're seeing that more than 2/3 of AI transformations are failing at the right at near the outset. I think, Sandy, you call on a few reasons as to why that's the case. I also think there's this challenge of the market overhyping what agents are really capable of, and the cost of value that, and all the CIOs that I'm speaking with across the world are not seeing that would deliver anything near what the hype suggests that it can, and that agents are still really highly dependent on kind of a step-by-step instructions for how to go execute a task or perform a thing and to deliver something that's not going to be a hallucination back to you. And so I think users are both finding this stuff difficult. The agents that are easy to adopt are producing confusing results. And so when you, as an IT leader, go to deploy this to your organization, and that's the user's first experience, change transformation is always the hardest thing, regardless of whether it's AI or not. And that will be the case until the dawn of time. And when this is the first experience of the user, all the more reason you're going to make it difficult. And so, I think a lot of what we've been putting our time and attention to is, how can you, Sandy, I think in the example that you gave, give it the right context, the right instruction at the right time, and enable, users, people to be able to take advantage of that. And I think there's this really interesting diagram I could share with the audience as a follow-up to this, but about sort of like where the y-axis is reliability and consistency, and then the x-axis is generalizability and autonomy. And I think what I'm referring to is on the further down you go on the x-axis, the greater likelihood of a hallucination you're going to see. The further you go up onto the y-axis, the more consistency in results. But that really does require you have a step-by-step, in our case, rule builder, where there's structure. You can point to a task or a project. You can get it pointed only to the relevant information it needs. You can give it clear instructions through the LLM that's embedded within that workflow, and you can integrate, human in the loop to execute for certain tasks, where the LLM is not capable.
I want to double down on this because it sounds like a lot of things are not working and are very difficult, and they might be. But I think there's a huge difference between just standard LLMs that could be hallucinating because they're not fine-tuning to what you're actually doing, and specific product and solution that were trained exactly to have a lot of guardrails and to minimize the number of oscillation. Now, is that going to be 100%? No, I don't think so. But is it going to be much better than human force working on this? I think it is. And again, the example I'm using, we got probably 2,000 leads in the last week, and we're not equipped to deal with those number of leads. If I did not have an AI that actually qualifies them and recommends what the team needs to do, I would lose many of them. Now, did the AI hallucinate them? Maybe. But 90% of them is actually pretty good. So I was able to make a lot of progress in a very short time because of that. It wasn't autonomous. I did not let the AI, respond instead of me and do those kinds of things. I don't think it's there yet, but it saves us so much time, and that's what I think companies should need to look at.
Mike, I just have one clarifying question. You opened by saying 2/3 of AI deployments are failing. Are those deployments of just kind of traditional AI augmentation or agentic AI offerings?
Good clarifying question. I think this is from our think tank that operates with independently of Asana, but is funded by Asana, and then in conjunction with university professors across the world, including locally here, at Stanford. And we're speaking to AI transformation exclusively, not specific deployments of the type of AI. I'm more pointing to, and I think, Omar, actually what you're saying resonates with me, and I think we're actually saying the same thing. Sandy was referring to cross-functional, deployments and dependencies cross-functionally where you don't have access to the data, which is what I'm speaking to as well. If you can, in your case, point to a very specific thing you're asking it to do, much greater likelihood of reliability there. It's when you have these sort of cross-functional dependencies where data is siloed, or you can't give it the appropriate context or instruction, or integrate a human to do those things where it doesn't have that ability. That's where the failure that I'm speaking to.
Yeah, I think that the thing, we've been drawing a distinction between augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence. And I think what Omar, you're interacting and you're building it versus having it go off on its own. I think that part of the challenge with adoption is people, even in that earlier stage of just using the LLMs, don't feel confident because of the hallucinations. And so releasing control to artificial intelligence because of the experience of current, gen search, hallucinations makes us uncertain and it makes it less reliable. I do think, to your point, Omar, though, for where it's pretty repeatable workflow and you can control the action, so lead quals, right? Feels like an agent can do that and you're not going to suffer from hallucination. Whereas I'm building a strategy and I need to figure out my new financial forecasting and go out and do a predictive model on that, and you have an agent that is acting as your outsourced FP&A that has to ingest data from your general ledger and all these other things. Like maybe it's just that's not a repeatable workflow. That's applying a level of intelligence that I think perhaps a lot of people today still are kind of anxious about. I can't trust the black box yet. But for repeatable workflow, absolutely. I tee it up and it's kind of like I got a robot, right? I got a robot that's going to do the thing that I can put judgment and parameters around and metrics. And to your point, you can discount leads and you put a feedback loop back on it. So I think there may be a distinction on those two levels, augmented versus artificial, and level of sophistication of the task being asked.
I completely agree, and I love those categorization, but I challenge our audience to think about something, because eventually what all of us are talking about, there's still a trust issue. It's trust, right? Some people trust it more. We all remember those days where we didn't trust our data to be in the cloud, right? Are we going to put our financial data, our customer data? It is in the cloud. These trust issues are going to be solved. Now, we can argue whether they're going to be solved in 3 months or 2 years, and I have no idea. But all of us need to plan for a future, which I think would be sooner than later, that those things would be solved. So I wouldn't say I'm not doing anything. I would say exactly what you do. Categorize it into the right stages and the right, I would say, operations and projects, and start moving quickly. Don't wait until those trust issues are going to be solved, because then you're going to be late.